this panel is really to bring to the forefront the role of business. And in the morning, Srinivasan mentioned something quite interesting. She says that corporations no longer have a choice about inclusion. They no longer have a choice about looking at inequality. And therefore, when we were deliberating on the entire conference, one of the things we also wanted to showcase, like the wall that we saw just now, is about what are corporations really attempting to do. And since morning, we've also recognized that the problem in front of us is enormous, requires obviously multi-stakeholder conversations. So this panel is really a conversation of a kind that the only brief I have given the participants, and I must confess that this is one of the few panels that I'm going to be on where I don't have a clue what the speakers are going to say. And the reason is deliberate. Why? Because I don't want to frame a lens and give it to them to talk about how they see this whole notion of inequality and how they are addressing it. All that I have done is just given them broad bullet points saying that this is what I know about your organizations as an outsider. I'm not too sure if you're doing something more, something better, something different. If you really want to do it, here is an open canvas and I will pick up in terms from where you are talking. And I think that's going to be one of the important aspects of the Globe Ethics Forum as we go forward in actually creating multiple conversations from different people and not always necessarily having the structure or an understanding of where they are coming from. So on this panel, I actually have three people from three highly reputed organizations in India. And I have Sridharan on the extreme left, and then I have Jitendra from Titan, and of course you heard in the morning the Tata Group company, and I think Sridharan and several of employees who work with them, and I don't know in what 100,000 those numbers are, they carry huge responsibility because the whole country in some sense looks up to the group as the beacon of ethical behavior. The second person that we have is Jitendra Chadha from Intel. We've heard the corporation perspective, but Jitendra really will delve a little bit more on what it is that they are doing as a company. And last but not the least, Dan Murthy from Infosys, who's going to talk about their experiences. And several of us, in the morning, Shibu was here, and clearly he did mention saying that Infosys does several things. So Dan Murthy is here basically to kind of give us an idea of what they are doing. And after that, I hope there will be about 8 minutes that we will get that I will open up to the audience, and that really is the tone for the session. I've requested the speakers to keep it to 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes if possible, then we could go ahead. Okay, over to you. I've moved the presentation soon. Okay. Okay, we'll start with you, Dan, and then go to
Good evening. Thank you, Vasanthi. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. First of all, congratulations to each one of you for what you do, and thank you for what you do to bridge the gap in the world. Thanks for spending the time discussing about it and participating in this session. I'll just quickly go over with you what we do and why we care as an organization. And I think it's been said many times that corporations have no choice. It's not out of not wanting to do, but it's more about a need to do and a compulsion to do, and it's a requirement that corporations do participate in the sustainable development of the world. And that's really why we do what we do, given the way the world is. And I don't want to go through any of what is on here because you know everything on the inequalities. But from the role of the corporation perspective, on the one hand, there is the use of resources that corporations do make use of from the planet, and therefore there's a need to give back. The other is corporations on the one hand also give employment, but by the same token have a responsibility to retain, generate, and create that as a sustainable model for the world to develop. So given both of those, I'll just quickly go over how we have approached sustainability and what are the components for us when we look at sustainability. And it's very simple. If we have to contribute towards sustainability, we have to make sure that we as an organization are sustainable. And then it is about making sure that we make our clients sustainable, because if our clients are not sustainable, we cannot. If the ecosystem is not sustainable, we will not exist. And of course, making our own lifestyle sustainable. And that is where I think we have a large influence, with 160,000 people working and therefore 160,000 families that we can influence. So that's where our approach comes, in looking at sustainability from all of these 4 entities that we deal with. And we've looked at sustainability from the perspective of the same 3 things that most of the world looks at, which are the part on social contract. Now, as an organization, you always have a contract with any entity that you deal with. Most often, the written contract is with the client, with the vendor partner, or with the employee. But there is also the unwritten contract in some sense with the communities that you operate in, and that's the part of the social contract. It's a large part about engaging with all your stakeholders, whether you have a written or an unwritten contract. And that's where the social contract aspect comes. The other part about our approach on sustainability is on responsible consumption. Because as an organization, as a corporation, there's always the resource part that we use. And looking at that from the perspective of how do we ensure that we don't take more than what we need, we give back, creating, for example, not only carbon neutral kind of approaches, but also water neutrality in our campus to make sure that we don't have to depend on the corporation, on the external corporation, on the city for water supply, as an example of looking at create responsible consumption. Then there is the part about green innovation, which is really the part about making sure that we are delivering solutions for our clients to be sustainable. So that's the approach that we have taken in solutions that we develop and the parts that we do in becoming a sustainable organization, and therefore making the ecosystem sustainable, our clients sustainable, and creating a lifestyle that's sustainable for our people. Now, there are several things that we do, and I'll just highlight one aspect of it, which is the Campus Connect program. And the Campus Connect program is bridging the gap between what the education system produces and what the industry looks for. And that's the big part about the social contract. Now, that there is a gap between what academic institutions do and what corporates need is a given, whether it is in India or outside India. That's a given, and you can find it from talking to corporations. You can, more importantly, find it out from talking to students after 1 year after they've graduated. That's where you really understand where the gaps are. We ask people how much of what they learned has been used, and that's where you identify the gaps. The gaps really come down to 3 aspects. One, given the industry that we are in, most of what I'm talking about is the gap between the engineering education and what we need for the software services industry in India. So the gap comes from 3 areas. One is the inability to apply the concepts learned in the context of the problems that they face when they get into the industry. The second is the ability to work well in teams, because for the most part, the academic world is about me and my marks, while the real world is about us and our team and our clients and really our world. Right? So that's the gap. The third gap comes, and largely in India, comes from the communication skills. The inability to express, the inability to communicate what they're thinking, and making sure that those things that they talk about are real things that make sense in the context of what they're talking about. So communication. So those are the 3 large gaps. And what we have done is run this program called Campus Connect. Campus Connect, so we have worked with more than 350 engineering institutions in India with the intent of helping students coming out of these institutions become industry ready. And the approach has been to work through faculty than through the students directly. Now, we work with more than 8,900 faculty members who have either come to our facility or our people have gone into those institutions, where we have shared with them the curriculum that we use for our people when they join us. So when any fresh engineer that joins Infosys, for example, goes through a 23-week residential program before they start working on client engagement. And that curriculum and what we do in the industry, how cases are, how the concepts learned by the students are applied for applications in the industry is really what we share with the faculty so that they can use them in the classroom. The result of that has been the engagement with more than 2.5 lakh students in India, not necessarily to join industry, not necessarily to join us in Infosys, but to make a difference to the industry. Because our belief is if the industry grows, then we will grow as well. And therefore, while about 20 to 25% of those people might have joined Infosys, the larger part of the contribution is really to make a difference to the lives of these people who come from different institutions and to make the ecosystem better for the professional services industry in India. And that's really how this program has worked. The other program related to students has been what we call as Spark. Now, Spark is a program that has been launched and has been there for over 5 years now. Is about raising aspirations of today's students. And that's a one-day program where we have students from the neighborhood institutions across the country in India, where we have campuses. We have 10 development centers in India. And students from the neighboring institutions come there for a one-day experience to understand really how IT can be used, but more importantly, what you can achieve when you have a large dream and the will to make it happen. So raising aspirations has been the theme of that program. And Spark is not an acronym. Spark is really what you see in the eye of those kids on that Saturday afternoon when they leave our campus. And the interesting thing is that all of this is run by volunteer Infosians, as we call our employees, because it has become a way of engagement with our people as well. In exit interviews, for example, I've heard people tell me that one of the things that we'll miss about leaving Infosys is the inability to engage with the community. And so that's the power of that program for our own people, let alone the ability to make a difference to the people that walk in. And our message to these students has been very simple. If 7 people in 1981 could come together and create a company that is 160,000 people, each and every single student in the country today can create another Infosys. It's really the dream that we are leaving behind for them in the Raising Aspirations program. And that's a large program that we run every weekend. And there are several other programs. So Infosys Science Foundation, for example, was launched to celebrate science and the success of the scientists in India with a prize money of rupees 55 lakhs for every individual person who has been selected through a world-renowned nomination committee. The Parishit program, for example, is about building toilets in villages. Because one of the things that came through was the lack of a toilet has a larger impact on the women in the villages, and that was studied through, and a lot of things where research was done, and the number of toilets that were created in villages is one example of the program that we ran. So there again, it was an engagement with the community, and a lot of it was also partnership with the government in making it happen. So most of the programs that we run have a partnership element. In the case of education, it is with the education institutions, it is with the government, it is with the faculty to make sure that anything that we do is sustainable. So I'll just leave it at that with some of the programs that we have run, and I think we can engage in a conversation. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so if my voice is not very clear, just let me know. I don't know where to start. Bad news or good news? Good news? Bad news. Bad news first, as somebody says. I'll put off my phone. The bad news for all of you guys is this is very late in the day, and you have a person speaking now who is not an expert on this subject. So you have to bear with me for next 10 minutes or so. And if I'm too lousy, I will know myself and I'll excuse myself early. But that is the bad news you have. So some of you guys may be thinking, so why am I here? If I'm not an expert, I don't know about the subject, why am I here? The real reason is all of my experts and colleagues are still on Christmas and New Year's vacation. Some people are in Goa, some are in Europe. When I last checked, someone was in US. And whenever I was checking with them, and they said, hey, why don't you do it? Why are you checking with us while we are on vacation? So that's the reason I am here. So what I'll do, I don't have a presentation. I told you I'm not an expert, so I don't know what you guys are doing.
We are finding you a presentation.
Okay, so put up a presentation, then I'll speak to it. Like, see me. That's even more boring. But anyway, so what I decided to do was, I will speak as an employee of Intel rather than as an expert on this topic. And I think at least I can grant myself that much liberty being 17 years with Intel that as an employee I can speak on this topic. So what you will hear from, you may not hear some of the big indicators or big goals that we have achieved and so on. But what I have experienced over the last 17 years, and to be very frank with you, over the last 6 to 7 years I have become to realize the importance of this subject. And I've started to internalize more than the first 10 years of my being at Intel. All of you guys know Intel as a company which is highly innovative in the workplace. We are the leaders in manufacturing processes. You know about great technologies we have brought into the marketplace for our customers over the last 45 years or so. And we are a $50 billion plus company now, and so on. And all those innovations in the manufacturing processes and the technologies and the designs that we have brought out have been, behind the $50 billion company as such a successful company we are in. One of the things I think which a lot of people, it's become a culture and the practice. We may not talk that much outside. But one of the reasons I think we have been successful is because the social, responsibility idea has been very tightly integrated into the management practices. And when I say, tightly integrated into the management practices, what has been my experience of it? So when I say management practices, every company has a mission and a vision statement. Every company has a strategic objectives, they call it. Every company has a governance model. Every company has a compensation and benefit philosophy and practice. And there is a value chain and structures that every company talks about. So if you really look at the vision of Intel today, it says that we will create and enable computing technology to take it to enrich every person on this earth within this decade, to enrich every person on this earth. And we all know it does not mean that we will have laptops in the hands of every person on this earth by the end of this decade. It is about how we will really make an impact globally to make a big change so that every person on earth can be impacted or positively impacted by either the technology we bring in or either the programs we bring out or the collaborations we establish with the government bodies, with academia, with the industries and so on and so forth. If you really look at some of the strategic objectives, then I looked at what is there within the strategic objectives. And one of the things I found out was that the positive environmental impact was one of the strategic objectives. And believe me or not, but every employees, and when I say every, I checked it before I'm making the statement, but every employee's bonus or paycheck is related to the environmental goals that company has taken. So when I talk about it is really very tightly integrated into our management practices. These are some of the examples that I thought I would bring in as an employee and what observations I've had of the company. So when we design a chip or when we start a new manufacturing process, one of the things I learned recently was that from 2007 and up till 2014, we may end up having 1 billion processes out, and these 1 billion processors will consume half the power of the previous 1 billion processors that went out into the market. Now you can calculate what impact it would create into the environment. The amount of water that will be used to run our operations from 2010 to 2020 will be half of per chip we will manufacture as compared to what we had a decade back. So these are some of the goals that are tied to how the organization operates and how the paychecks are being given to people. And if we don't meet some of these requirements, all of our paychecks, would get impacted within the company. The other thing I would like to talk about is, ethics and governance. If you really look at, how the board is established, 8 out of 10 members of the board are independent directors. There is a clear separation of duty between the CEO and the chairman. We have a code of conduct training. I've been in this 18th year of at Intel, and for last 18 years, I have to take that code of conduct training every year. If I have not taken that training by end of the year, and it's every year, whether I'm doing good, whether I'm doing bad, whether I know all the code of conduct principles or not, every employee in the company has to take that training every year. And if I've not taken, there are dire consequences of not completing the training on time. And every employee which comes in, and even when we start, when we start hiring the person, this kind of a training is given to those people. But anyway, so this was internally, how some of our management systems are tightly integrated into the management practices, whether it's mission, vision, compensation, so on and so forth. Now there are some external parts that I have seen, and one of the things I think I love to work for this company is, of course, apart from the paycheck and all other things, is the kind of platform I get to be able to do the work outside of the company. And this is our, I don't even like to call social responsibility. This is about doing the right thing, in the community. And without this platform, it would be very hard as an individual for me to make an impact. But using the platform that the company provides, we are able to make a bigger impact. So a couple of things, couple of examples there. Education is one of the passions each of us has at Intel, and we very seriously believe that if you basically make a big impact in the education around the world, I think the more educated the people are, the more empowered and then more self-sufficient they would get. So that is one area we have been focusing very hard. For example, in India, we have trained close to 2 million teachers who can impart training to the students in the deepest part of the country, so that those students or the people who do not have all the facilities can learn from the teachers who have been imparted training in India. And these are the programs which are worldwide. And when I say about why I like these programs is because 50% of our employees do participate in one or the other CSR activity. And how it helps me is not only I participating, but every hour I donate or devote to the community, Intel pays $1, or now it is more than $1, to the foundation where I'm doing my service. So if I do 50 hours in a year, or I can do 50 hours in a quarter, then $50 goes to that foundation. And believe me, for the country like India and the kind of resources that are required to make the social change, that $50 is not a small amount. And for 4,500 employees we have, if 50% of the employees are doing that, that becomes a huge money. And nobody stops me to pick which foundation I want to pick. Well, of course, there are only two guardrails. It has to be ethical foundation, and it has to be serving the real purpose. If those two things happen, then I can choose my foundation and do the service I want to do in the community. Now, I'll not dwell more into the examples. I have a couple of more minutes left. But then I started to look at, okay, so why does this work? And if I'm so passionate about it, if I like all this in the company, how is it working? And I came up with 3 reasons why it's working. And that may be true for other companies or not. But one is, I think there is a tone from the top, was the top reason I thought why all of this was working. Why a culture of giving back to the society, doing the right things right was the case. And the management and the leadership, providing the culture and really making an example by doing things themselves in the right manner and doing the right things is what is the number one reason I thought, why it was working. I think the second reason was we have a distributed philosophy of doing these things within the community. The one program that works for US may not or definitely will not work in the country like India. So we have some kind of an autonomy to be able to take overall program, take the overall fundings, and then make it part of or tweak it so that it can be more impactful in the region or in the country or wherever we are working. And the third reason for doing this is the partnerships that we had to establish to make the impact. I don't think if Intel tries to do everything by itself, it's going to work. The National Digital Literacy Program that Kumud talked about in the morning, it has 30 partners who are technology company partners and an association like NASCOM involved with that program to be able to make that difference. We have our employees, giving time to that program or volunteering for that program to be able to make that difference. If 3 million people were trained through digital literacy program in last 9 months, it was because of those partnerships that we were able to establish. So, first, tone from the top, the distributed approach or doing the things right within the regions of the country, and really partnering around to make a bigger impact are the three reasons why I think it works for a company like Intel. So I'll stop here. And I don't know if we are doing everything right or, you heard a lot of good things from Infosys, if all of us are doing things right. But I can only tell you, by doing things in this area, you will not go wrong. That is a guarantee. So just do it. Thank you. By the way, the good news is Sridhar is there after me.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much. And I think, Jitendra, that was a great addition. I mean, in terms of just the perspective, and I think I like the idea of an employee perspective, which kind of fits into the stakeholder perspective that we are talking about. Yeah, thank you. Sridharan, I think, do we have his presentation? Yeah.
And Manoj, my mentor, there we are. For giving this opportunity and sharing a few things what we do to be completely discreet and like what you rightly said. Yes, it has plenty of slides, but let me probably share with you a few things in the time what to do that. A challenge on that. Okay, we all know this. We are part of the Tata Group, joint venture company with the state government of Tamil Nadu, and we have seen this, and I'm sure many of you know about this. The largest business group with 7 sectors, close to $100 billion turnover, and about 60%, little more, maybe about 65% turnover from outside the country, growing at a rate of about 15.5 CAGR and $100 million turnover. And we'll skip this a little faster. Titan company, we believe in creating value for our shareholders, stakeholders. A bit of an interesting thing, 25 years, 26 years we are into, and we probably didn't have a single statement which we believed that we should create one and say this is our vision. But perhaps in the recent past, we all believed that we should do something different. And how do we do this differently? And I just want to spend a minute on this vision we create, elevating experiences for people who we touch and significantly impact the world we work in. And that's something which starts resonating in the way we did our business, the way we do our social responsibility, and the way we conduct ourselves as employees in this organization. And this is something we just recently evolved, and I think this signifies a lot and also talks about a lot about being a Tata employee. Our business, we are in watches and accessories, we are in the jewelry business, we do a business of eyewear. We are also into a B2B business, which is the precision engineering, which makes parts and components and automation solutions, typically in the aerospace segment, and we perhaps are closer to $2 billion turnover the last year. We have been an industry leader across all the segments and all the B2C segments we have touched in this country, and we are the largest player in each of this, in the top watch brand and the jewelry brand, and also we are becoming the fastest growing eyewear brand in this company. Creating sustained excellence, and this is the model we typically, I just try to put this around on what we are. In this, if you really see what business excellence, and that's something which we have been very consistently practicing over the last almost close to a decade and a half, and this is typically modeled on the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And that's something which we believe is what the entire business and the entire company is encompassed with. Corporate social responsibility, out of which affirmative action, and probably I'll spend a couple of minutes on this subject as we go along. Climate change, innovation, safety, and of course, embedded in all these things is the Tata Code of Conduct. Is the way in which the group conducts itself, the companies conduct themselves, and each one of us conduct ourselves being a part of the Tata Group. I'm not taking you in each of this, but I think these 5 key words resonate what the Tata Group stands for. One is integrity, and I think the founders of this group actually have lived, have imbibed under the DNA of all of us in Tata Group of companies, understanding excellence, unity, and responsibility going beyond what we are doing as business. And these Tata values have been ingrained in each one of us as individuals, as a Tata employee. I just spent about a few minutes on a couple of things, what we are doing, and it's been ingrained as part of our DNA on the ethics. If you look at ethics, the Tata Code of Conduct, and that's something which all of us not just sign off, but then we live by it. And if you look at my own company, in terms of, we do have a clear governing structure, and the governing structure actually starts at the board level. And today there is a tightened board, and right from the board level to the managing director to every one of us have created a governing structure in this company on how the ethics has to be driven and how the ethics is actually imbibed in whatever we do, in whichever stakeholder we touch. Tata Code of Conduct, we do have created policies which are actually contemporary to the way in which we do businesses, whether it is policies on gifting, and the most recent law in the country about prevention of sexual harassment, and there's something which is dear to all of us. Looking at honorariums, the way we look at whistleblowers, I think all of this are imbibed in our own organization, which we constantly look into, relook into, get our own stakeholders onto this bandwagon in terms of understanding what it means and delivering on each of these consistently over and over again. Governance structure, we do have board ethics committee, which is extremely powerful, which extremely guides us constantly and gives us inputs. We do have, of course, the chief ethics counselor, which is actually one of the CEOs who actually heads this, and there is a tenure for this. We have ethics structure. We do have committees where people have been trained on all this in terms of policies, in terms of understanding what each of this means for us as a business, and we also have established processes and structures to enable implementation, not just within the organization, but across all our stakeholders. Let's take a minute to probably, we just created this in the recent past. What does sustainability or social responsibility mean to us? We believe we need to make people future ready. And the key words are, we want to empower. I think Jit actually mentioned education as the most fundamental form of empowerment to anybody, whichever part of the globe we are in. We like to empower the most exploited, neglected, and weaker sections of our society in the locations where we are present, and that's something which we would like to do and like to do good. And also look at systematic interventions in education, health, and employability skill building through reliable and capable partners with volunteerism, high focus on measurability and driving meaningful and sustainable change. We just started putting these things in the form of some sort of statements, but each one of this has been part of our DNA in this organization ever since the inception. And I'll share you a couple of examples what I mean by this. One of the things, and I think this is something which is gaining extreme importance in the corporate world in India, and that's something which we need to be aware of. It's about the affirmative action. In India, it's defined by scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, who have been perhaps marginalized in many ways, not just decades, but perhaps centuries. And therefore, to do something or undo something which has happened over a period of time is a great challenge for the corporate world. Of course, the government sectors have its own way of dealing with this, but for the corporate world, it's a huge challenge, and that's something which the Tata Group has taken a lead in doing something about it. And we in Titan have actually gone along the same direction and done a lot of work around that. We have created an exclusive policy which the board is fully supportive of it, and that's something extremely important if you have to make significant strides. We work on all the 4 E's, which is about employability, employment, education, and entrepreneurship. And of course, we have been part of the national agenda also on this. If I can look at some couple of examples, we have focused our engagement again, ensuring that it is part of our own CSR strategy and not another independent strategy, what we want to do, and therefore it is highly integrated. Numbers are not very great, but then if you really look at some of these directions in which we are moving, you look at 6%, 8%, our own ecosystem which works at very high levels at 43% of employment in terms of community which they belong to. It's something very, very encouraging, and that's something even the Tata Group is significantly pursuing. We have, of course, incorporated some of these requirements in our own recruitment practices. The other one, which is huge, and this country is realized either through the National Skill Development Corporation or even otherwise, huge gap in terms of these skilled employees available for the industry. And there also sits a huge number of people who belong to this category. And therefore, we have started working on employability skill development. We have partnered with quite a few organizations and clearly working on this at the bottom of the pyramid, especially people who belong to this community. And co-creating skills which are important both for industry and for our own organization. Similarly, we work with institutions like ITIs, which are extremely in a very bad state in the country. And we are really working along with them to really uplift them with long-term plans and interventions. On the education, of course, we have our own scholarship scheme, which has been running around for the last 18 years now. And now we are focusing exclusively on some of these areas in terms of working with this particular community and therefore creating inclusivity out of that. We are working with the CII, with Tamil Nadu government, because we happen to be in Tamil Nadu, to work on the student community to look at career counseling. Because a huge gap between the class 8 to 10. And therefore, working on that and looking at these communities to be really streamlined and mainstream, so to speak, in terms of career counseling and so on and so forth. And about almost 90% of them are SC/ST. We are also working on exclusive tribal schools. And today, we have every alphabet for the tribals in the country, and they are extremely marginalized. In fact, many of them are not even scheduled in the constitution. And that's something we are focusing on, and we are working with some of the tribal schools. And of course, entrepreneurship. We create entrepreneurs from this community, they create more and more employment, and that's something we are focusing on in the recent past. One last example is something which we are extremely passionate about, and a lot of case studies have been written around this, is about creating sustainable livelihood. And this is a program which we have worked with the women in the place where we come in from, that is Hosur in Tamil Nadu. This district, when we started our plant in the year 86, 87, we realized that this particular district has a huge amount of issues with the women in terms of the girl child, in terms of female infanticide, in terms of early marriages, and so on and so forth. So we quickly realized that if we have to remain sustainable and if our business has to be sustainable in this place, we've got to do something with that. And therefore, we partnered with an organization called Myrada and created self-help groups in terms of managing and creating job opportunities, training them, and therefore Titan also becomes an exclusive customer for them. So we initially were used to outsource certain very, very low-end jobs, and we started thereafter looking at skilled activities in terms of both watches, the jewelry, and today even the Christian parts, which sometimes are being done by them. And between the last 18 to 19 years, we have created almost 26 such self-help groups. And today it's a completely self-sustained group, and it's a CSR case and no more a CSR investment in that sense. And more than about 650 women are involved, and they are extremely. And the beauty of this whole thing is they are managed by women who are at the board of this particular self-help group, and that's the good thing, because they themselves negotiate, they themselves work with the company, and therefore they are putting the money back into their own business. And almost every year we are adding on to 2 to 3 new self-help groups in this area. Of course, if you look at economic status has improved, and the most important point, when you have money, you get empowerment in some form, and that's significantly gone up. Decision making has gone up, savings habit has gone up, and overall the status of women society is significantly improving in this particular district. And this is something I thought which is very unique and very dear to us, and today we are scaling this up in other parts of the country where we are present in. Of course, some of the challenges are critical, which one is getting the right partner to work with, and that's something very important with the companies bill and therefore the CSR mandate coming in the parliament in the country. There are a lot of fly-by-night NGOs who like to do many things. Therefore, we must be very cautious whom do we work with. Significant challenge to work with the affirmative action community, because we all know there are big numbers, but they're not available. They don't come. Because there are many other schemes which are counterproductive in many ways for them to come and actually start working or perhaps even start educating themselves. Of course, co-creating opportunities for investment don't start with the business case. And I believe personally, it will follow. If you start with CSR, business case will follow later on. And do it straight, values and ethics are paramount. And I just leave this presentation with the last statement by the founder of our group. We do not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic than any other people. But we think we started on a sound and straightforward business principles, considering the interest of the shareholders as our own and the health and welfare of the employees, sure foundation of prosperity. Thank you so much for your patience.
To the audience. Questions only, no comments, no observations. Specific questions. Yes.
Hearing all the good things that big corporations are doing in India, what perspective do you have for India to reach the goals you are here for?
With all the good work that the companies are doing for India, what do you believe in terms of how India will achieve the goals, whether it's the Millennium Development Goal in particular? Sorry? Equality goals.
I think from where I come in, from my own company, the Tatas, we are making significant progress, and the progress has been more significant in the recent past. Of course, the laws and things like that keep pushing on you. But I think as corporates, and if you have heard both Intel and many more such corporates, the private sector and corporate world is actually significantly gearing up towards that. And if I had to see the Millennium Development Goals as an example of last year's status, I think we are fairly progressed well, I would say, in most of the areas.
I think my perspective on India, with so much of disparity, I think we have a long, long way to go. And it will take, lot, and every organization, every government body, everyone concerned who can help to fill in the gap that we have in the countries like India. So today, to be very frank, I'm not even thinking, how much progress we'll make. I personally am thinking, just keep doing it. For next 10 years, whatever you can do, just keep doing it. And whatever progress you will make, it will be on the right side. That is my perspective. There's such a big gap in India on the inequality or equality part of equation is that a lot more work is required and a lot more partnerships are required to fill that gap.
Accurate. I think we have no choice but to reach the equality goals if we want to have a stable society in India. And I think we will get there sooner than we think because of the combination of the demographic dividend and technology, what we saw before our presentation on technology. I think that combination will drive this faster than we think, but I think it will happen.
There's one hand there.
Very quick question.
Good evening. As we are talking about equality, sir, I'd like to know about the policies, the ratio and accessibility of a differently abled employee in your companies.
Yes. So I'll answer and then I'll do each one of these. So 33% of our workforce is women. On the differently abled employees, we have a policy to give them the facility that they require for them to work depending on where the different abilities come from. So both of those exist in the organization.
Diversity is at 25-26%. On the technology side, a little less, but overall 26%. And on the other disability, the specific question you asked, We have a few employees, but the policy is that we will provide all the facilities so that there is no hindrance for anybody to be able to work in the facility. That's where the policy stands for.
We as a practice, right from day one, we ensure differently able as part of our recruitment process. Approximately about 2.5% to 3% is the numbers now. We have 27% women employees in the gender, so to speak. The third diversity is about the affirmative action, and that's something also we, on an equal platform we need to see. We are across the ecosystem between 12 to 13% across all, from the vendors to suppliers and so on and so forth.
Okay. I'm sorry, but okay, there are just too many questions on this panel, but I can see that we are overshooting on time. Please forgive me just this time because Christoph is here and he's been signaling to me for 7 minutes. I'm in a truly helpless state, but I promise that, can I take the liberty of promising on your behalf another half an hour of your time so that the three of them can catch up with you? Yeah? Thank you very much. And on that, I just want to use just 2 minutes, and I promise you 5:20, okay? I think there are 3 key messages that I get, and I think it's important for us to kind of deliberate on this. The first and the most important one is what we saw was implicit responsibility. None of them used the word equality or inequality other than in their question responses. So in a way, it's fascinating that while the conference is around equality and inequality, in their own ways, they seem to be doing things to address this issue without labeling it as a process of addressing inequality. To me, that's insightful. The second one that kind of struck me really is there seem to be implicit notions of corporate responsibility that they are practicing. And there are explicit expectations of corporate responsibility that we've had being articulated since morning. So somewhere the implicit notions of what they are doing is probably something that we need to invest more time in understanding the nature of that and tie it to the dominant discourse on what is this notion of equality that we are looking at. Yeah? So in some way I see a brokering that is required from both sides. But the last one that I took away, and I think it was explicitly mentioned by all of them, but I think Jitendra mentioned it very strongly, and Sridharan provided evidence, was what's the tone at the top? And I think the tone at the top is not just about corporations, it's actually about governments, it's about not-for-profit organizations, it's about responsible leadership. And probably that's a theme that we also need to spend a little bit more time on how do we actually create responsible leaders who focus on looking at equality. And on that note, thank you so much. I think there were a lot of insights, and I'm sure the panelists had many more questions. Thank you very much for that.